Hmm. Not great. Okay. Well, welcome to a slightly different looking video today. I wanted to share a couple of experiences with you that I've had over the last week, of course, relating to photography. But what do you think of my little humble studio? It is in the garage. It is kind of hidden away a little bit, but I think it looks quite cool. But I'm hoping to do some videos every so often in here, of course, out in the field. So it will be a little bit different, but here I can hopefully give some tips, experiences, and some general advice moving forward, really. So I had the opportunity to photograph a local rock band, which was an incredible evening. It was really, really good fun. And I wanted to share this with you, give some tips, give some positives, negatives, and hopefully a little bit of confidence to help you to contact local bands and to actually photograph events of a similar nature as well. Okay, so the general idea of the video is going to be a top 10 tips and tricks. But I'd also like to tell you a little bit about the kit I was using and what I found surprisingly positive about the whole experience as well. So, of course, I'm using my Lumix S1 camera. I would wholeheartedly say words, Kieran, recommend. And I've also using the 20 to 60 kit lens. Of course, it is a kit lens. This is a 3.5 to 5.6 aperture for the event, and also my 70 to 300 f4.5 to 5.6 lens. Love this lens. I've spoken about it before, but as you can tell, they weren't particularly they're not designed for low light events and so on. So I did also have my little Olympus EM5 with me with the Nike 25mm f1.8 lens as well, which is a little bit of fun. But I would like to say that I was really surprised. I had to, of course, go use high ISOs, but the images come out surprisingly clean. I wasn't expecting to have any good images to come away with, but actually there were quite a lot that I was really, really happy with. Of course, I'll show you some kind of right here. And this is in particular considering that these two lenses aren't designed for that kind of light. They're not designed for particularly fast moving subjects. And that's also the reason why I said I would recommend the Lumix S1 is because of that exact reason. Again, I'm not sponsored, they don't know I exist, it's just personal recommendation. Another couple of observations is that of course people were quite fast moving with the nature of the events, and it was dark. It was very, very dark, which presented a couple of unique challenges, but of course hopefully after this video you'll be able to overcome some of them at least. Okay, tip number 1. Batteries, batteries, batteries. I've said previously about either not having batteries charged, this one's charging at the moment, or coming out with a half empty, for example, not connecting or completely forgotten them entirely. I used, of course, a single battery on the Lumix and on the Olympus, and they run out quicker than you expect. I was doing a shoot for 3 hours, of course, on burst mode, shooting mixture of auto and manual focusing as well. We'll go to that a bit later on. But towards the end of it, there were a couple of concerns about not having enough battery life. Of course, I've invested in a second battery now, but it was a steep learning curve actually realising that you're only halfway through the event and you've only got a third of your battery life left. The issue is with this is that then you start to become a little bit more cautious about what you are on photographing. meaning that you might miss some really cool shots, which I may have done, of course. But if you can bring 2, 3, 4 batteries, what that does, that just provides a little bit more security, that you can just keep shooting for the whole day. Again, this is going to be the same with any event as well. So, for example, weddings. If you were to shoot a wedding, you wouldn't want to do the whole thing on one battery. They are quite cheap. You can get them used or third-party lens batteries. So, for example, I've got the new one from here, which is from Duracell, which is quite cool. They have a reputable brand. Of course, everybody knows who Duracell are. But yeah, that's tip number 1. Batteries, batteries, batteries. Okay, tip number 2. Quite similar to batteries. SD cards fill up a lot quicker than you might expect. Again, especially if you are shooting in this burst mode. I actually shot in medium burst mode on my camera, just to try and, of course, save some of the memory restrictions. I had a 128GB card in my Lumix and a 64GB card in my Olympus. By the end of the evening, both of them were filled, and this actually only took, again, about 3 hours, just over. With that, if you are able to get a couple of batteries, SD cards, even if they're a little bit smaller, 64GB, but just have them in storage and start slowly collecting them. What that means is, again, alongside with the batteries themselves, you will have that confidence, 1, for redundancy. For example, if one of them corrupts or stops working, and 2, so you can just be a little bit more easily shooting when it comes to burst mode. Again, you can go to quicker burst modes as well to capture the exact shot that you really want to capture as well. Since then, I've got another 64GB one for my Lumix, but I am actually going to slowly start to collect probably more 64GB cards of a higher quality, but have a little storage case to go with them, so then at least you know you're never going to run out. So that's tip number 2. Think about your memory. Tip number 3. When you're photographing in an area with poor light, in particular a concert festival, you will have lights that come on and off, flashing, of course. Some of them for a couple of seconds, some of them for kind of a good 10-15 seconds, and then you have the time to compose, focus, and of course get the shot that you want. Other times it will be very dark for extended periods of time. So what I quickly found was, even if I wasn't able to focus on the first attempt with the light, I was able to focus and maintain focus with the settings I had on my camera, which is the back button autofocus. I'll talk to you about that in just a second. But what this meant was that once I had the focus locked, all I had to do was wait for that light to show again, and then I was able to capture that photograph I really wanted to. With events, there are a few repetitive motions, of course, with the musicians themselves, so leaning forward, singing, shouting into the microphone, for example. This can provide a great way to get around the fact that these lenses aren't really designed for low light, because you're focusing when there is light, and then, of course, you are then going to be prepared for when the light hits again, just to try and capture as much detail in the images as you can do. So if this also fails, I used a couple of times manual focus with focusing aids, just to help me to see where the focus was. And I wasn't really too fussed about the low depth of field, because again, it's 3.5 and 4.5, so I wasn't going to really miss focus. It was more about just getting focus in terms of the whole musician, essentially. So if you can use manual focusing aids, try to use them, or try to autofocus when there is light and a consistent light, and then hold that focus using the back button autofocus rather than the shutter autofocus. And that leads me to tip number 4. Okay, tip number 4 is about changing your settings to allow for back button autofocus. When I saw this, I thought on YouTube and forums and Facebook pages and groups and so on, I never really understood why. I thought it was going to be more of an inconvenience than anything to actually have back button autofocus rather than focusing on the shutter itself. This really has an advantage when it comes to the tip I gave beforehand about the focusing when there's light, because what happens is that if you have the shutter button as the focusing, what's going to happen is, of course, you're going to lose focus every time you want to take the shot. Whereas on back button autofocus, you can either focus and recompose, or you can focus, hold it, stay where you are, and of course fire the shutter at the moment that you know that there's decent light, with the confidence that you are actually focused on the subject, the musician, the guitar, the piece of equipment, of course, they're going to be using. For me, this was probably one of the biggest game changers I've been using back button autofocus for about 3 years now. When other people try to use my camera, they find it a bit strange and it takes a little bit to get used to. But now it's actually more of a natural movement where you just press your back button or any other button if you can control the focusing settings, of course. It becomes natural, it becomes quicker, and actually it allows for more creative possibilities when it comes to concerts and in particular low light. Okay, tip number 5. I don't think it's focused on that one. I need to figure out how to change my autofocus settings on here actually. But anyway, tip 5. Cameras, in particular modern cameras, can maintain great image quality even with high ISOs. I was shooting at ISO 12,800 for most of it, again to try to capture as much light as possible. And that's partly the reason why I mentioned about not thinking I would have any clean images that I was able to use. But I was really, really surprised, in a positive way, of course. But the reason why I was using such high ISOs is because of the quick movements of the musicians. I was photographing a rock concert, of course, with the headbanging, the quick movements of the drummer and the guitar as well. And I wanted to try and keep this as sharp as I possibly could do, so I wanted to keep my shutter speed as quick as possible. I was generally shooting around 1/320th of a second, there or thereabouts. I wouldn't really go any slower than this from my experience. I did take some with 1/250th of a second, but the moment I started to go slower than that was when I started to notice blurring in the images. So this leads to my next tip, which is keep the shutter speed high even if the ISO remains high as well. Again, it is appreciated that it is in a dark room. My kit was less than ideal for the event itself, but actually because of that you can work around some of the noise and you can actually bake that into some of the character of the image as well. Again, you'll see this very shortly. But yeah, shutter speed's high, keep them as quick as you reasonably can do, of course the quicker the better, and that would really help with getting that tack sharp image when the light, of course, does come. Okay, this is going to be a strange one. So this leads me on to tip number 6. When I was researching into concert photography, I got told that red light would be particularly difficult to deal with, partly because of the pigment in the skin having red in it, which means that you would lose detail in the face and all the features as well. I wasn't really too sure what to believe with this, but turns out it is very, very true. So if you can do, try to avoid photographing in red light, and if you can do, there are possibilities if you wanted to keep that image to turn it into black and white as well. This actually leads on to my next tip as well. But yeah, red light, be aware of, you do lose detail and you do lose some of that contrast as well, in particular with skin tones. Okay, no more cars. Okay, number 7. Up close and personal shots are quite a cool way, especially if you have the capacity with a longer lens, to really try to capture the emotion of the artist, the musician. You can really get into their faces and show that they are passionate about the music, and actually able to, by getting in close, you are able to, for one, remove the distractions, 2, focus on the light that is available, even if it is limited as well, and 3, capture something which, for one, may be used as a profile picture, of course, if it really focuses on that particular artist as well, and that could actually lead to further sharing in the future. Some of my favourite images were up close shots, for example, this one here. Of course, with that, I would say don't go exclusively telephoto. I got some of my really enjoyable shots which were wide angle as well, which showed the whole band or the body movements in general. But of course, if you are looking at low light situations, if you are to zoom in post processing, then you will have more trouble keeping the details in the faces as well. So yeah, consider getting up close and personal. These next 2 tips are kind of interlinked. So, tip number 8 is go black and white. I've never really enjoyed black and white photography. I mean, I like it and I think it has its place. I do, however, believe that it can be overused, in particular to mask for poor lighting. Again, my nature is, my typical style of photography is landscapes, outdoors, and so on. And again, it has its place. But I've always been resistant to it and only using it as either an active choice to make something black and white, or as a way to make an image look a little bit different and unique. But actually, when it comes to concert photography, for one, black and white photos can really help with the noise reduction. I think it's maybe because there's less detail in the image itself that you'll see less of the artifacting in general. But it also creates quite a unique image, even in low light, where you can just capture silhouettes of musicians and artists. You can capture the light just bouncing on one side, or of course fully on the individual themselves as well. But consider looking at black and white images, even if the noise is quite high, because you may be surprised at how clean the image looks afterwards. So that's tip number 8. Okay, and this tip is of course going to be completely opposite, but let me explain. Embrace the colour. So I mentioned beforehand that red light can be quite difficult for the skin. For skin tones, you'll lose details in kind of facial features and on the arms and so on. But with concert photography, you'll have many, many different lights. You have greens, blues, oranges, reds, all different types. And some of my favourite images I actually thought would have been black and white. Of course, I tried to make the proactive step to try and make this a black and white image. But in the case of this one, you'll be able to see the red hair. Of course, that's not his natural colour. But that matched with the purples and the blues on his skin tones as well, made for a really compelling image, but also hid just enough information to make you want to look at it more. It showed that emotion. And again, concert photography has a lot of flashing lights of all different colours. Try to lean into that. And you can hopefully capture something with a lot deeper meaning rather than a black and white. Of course, if you can make the colour work, definitely give it a go. Again, some of my favourite images were meant to be black and white, but actually I preferred them in colour. This particular one, as well, as I mentioned beforehand, I've actually saved both and looked over them for quite a while. You'll have to let me know what you think actually. What do you prefer, the black and white or the colour? Okay, and final tip of this episode, which may or may not be possible, of course. So, right at the very beginning, I mentioned I've got these two lenses with not great apertures. Because of that, I have actually invested in a cheap 85mm 1.4 is this one, but even if you can get a cheap millimeter, a prime lens with a 1.8 aperture on it, that would really help to capture the cleaner and sharper images, of course, without having to bring the noise too high. And also many primes nowadays can be quite cheap, depending on, of course, on the focal length you go for. Although they're not ideal, manual focus can help just to lower the price, just to get you into the medium of concert photography. Although I also understand that this isn't for everybody. People can't necessarily afford new lenses all the time, and I get that, and I'm exactly the same. I would love to have a 2.8 70-200 zoom with all the features. I'd love to have a full set of primes, 1.4 throughout. They cost a fortune if you're not careful. But this leads me on to, I guess, a bonus tip, which is just give it a go. Just go for it. Again, you'll see the images in a moment, and these were with these two lenses, which really aren't designed for low light photography, and a Micro Four Thirds camera. Of course, quicker aperture, but Micro Four Thirds nonetheless. I've got some of my favourite images I think I've ever taken, and this is just using this basic kind of equipment I already had. So, long story short, have the confidence, get in touch with local bands, and just give it a go. You may be very, very surprised. Before I do go, very quick consideration. Think of the legs. My legs were sore the day after. When you are at the front of a crowd, you are trying to be out of the way and trying to be invisible, which of course creates the most candid shots. You will be squat walking for about 3 hours straight, so make sure you have a day off if you can do the next day. It does, it makes a difference. It's a workout, trust me. Okay, so my overall experience. I love the genre. I love the style of photography. I think it is fun, exciting, lots and lots to learn. I learned so much in just one day's or one set of few hours. And I personally cannot wait to do it again. I'm actually actively contacting other bands and music venues as well to try and get more events in the weekends. But yeah, I love the experience, and I'm hoping to keep this going on for more of a longer term basis as well. But let me know what you do think of these tips as well. Let me know if you found any of them helpful, in particular with the back button autofocus. Give it a go. If you don't like it, change it back. And I hope you like these upcoming images. But if you like this style of video as well, drop me a comment, drop me a like, drop me a subscribe if you can do. That'd be very, very helpful. As you can tell, I am just starting out with YouTubing. And hopefully, until next time, keep shooting.